8:42. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask for the roll call, please.
Councilmember Abdelgawad.
Here.
Councilmember Barber.
Present.
Councilmember Berenson.
Present.
Councilmember Burke.
Present.
Councilmember Forster.
Present.
Councilmember Holman.
Present.
Councilmember Townsend.
Present.
Councilmember Wills.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present. We have a quorum. Would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no presentations and awards this evening or personal appearances on the agenda, so we'll move into staff reports. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Gress to make a staff report for Development Services.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Sort of a brief report here from my department this month. A slow month for permits, but a busy month for inspections and plan review in terms of building inspections are concerned. I want to highlight a couple projects that are out and about in the community that are reaching, I guess, substantial completion. The first of which would be the Lead Center, as we're getting closer to the first day of school. There's only a couple minor punch list items for that building, and so we're excited to see that underway. We actually had a meeting this afternoon with one of the principals there at RAPAC, and I do believe they're going to do a dedication of that facility probably sometime in September, so that'll be exciting. The Whataburger reached several construction milestones this last month. They paved their parking lot here this past week, I think, and staff, the police department, myself, and engineering had a meeting last week to discuss traffic planning for their grand opening. They're right now targeting somewhere around Labor Day. They kind of told us to stay flexible as they get closer and closer to the finish line, but a good planning meeting here to discuss traffic patterns with as it relates to that store. And in addition, staff held a pre-construction meeting for the Prairie at Carroll Farm subdivision, which the council will see the first plat for that here probably in a couple weeks. That's the one that surrounds Timber Creek Elementary. And so we're working with that engineer on a couple of revisions to that set of plans that will eventually make its way back to the council. Last but not least, I wanted to highlight, we've talked a lot about, and you'll hear a little bit about the project this evening, but Raymore Commerce Center, Building 1, which is Southern Glazers, this past month, building official John Warner and the Fire Marshal Brett Palmer took a trip to Lawrence, Kansas, where that company has built a very similar, almost exact replica facility. And so they made a visit there to get a look at the inside and some of the equipment that's going to go into this facility. And so we are wrapping up the plan review this week for all the interior finish work that company will do over the next couple of months. So a lot of exciting things going on throughout the rest of the year. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Gress? All right, thank you. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. Thank you, sir. I would remind the council that we do have a somewhat important work session coming up next Monday night. As usual, we start that work session early. I'll be posting it up accordingly. We will be presenting the city manager's proposed budget to the council. Following that particular work session, there are then 10 weeks of the council having the ability to comment on that, the public having the comment on that, and a lot of give and take on it. The first work session following that one will actually be our 5th Monday work session, which will be a joint meeting with the Arts Commission. However, on the back end of that particular meeting, I will be posting up for an initial presentation to the council relative to some elements that you'll be hearing about next Monday night as well. That concludes the city manager's report tonight, if there are no questions. For the very last time, I would call on Chief Zimmerman to make a report for the police department.
The very last time. I asked Mr. Fearborn, what do you think the council would like to hear about, and decided on talking about the things that have happened over the past 10 years that I've been here. So just a list of things that have occurred during my tenure, but I have to say that without the support of the city manager, without the support of the council, without the incredible intelligence and intuitive thought process on the part of the police department, none of these things would have happened. So this list isn't mine. This list belongs to everyone who had a part in making these things happen. So just really quickly, we created a patrol lieutenant's position. We had officer pay raises from range 9 to 11, created a crime analyst position, created a senior IT position, Animal control, we increased those positions from 1.5 to 2.5 FTEs. We hired a new emergency manager, and he's done okay, I think. Upgraded that to a director's position ultimately, created a half-time PD assistant, administrative assistant, later upgraded to 3/4 time. We had a pension upgrade from 1.5% to 2%. We created programs like Shop with a Cop, the Community Against Crime event with the Fall Festival, the SRO program, the chaplain program. Equipment purchases were the drone program, the firing range, the command post vehicle, the fleet change from sedans to SUVs, exterior vest carrier, our handgun transition, which provided greater safety and ease of use, body cameras, updated in-car video system, radio upgrade implementation, the license plate reader, new bikes for our officers, cargo boxes in the vehicles, the Morpho fingerprint ID mobile identification system, and then upgrades to the police department, the PD renovation, the squad room, locker room, records unit, property and dispatch, animal control improvements, the dog run, dumpster, fence, software, and cat condos, and then policy upgrade twice during my 10 years, and published that on the website, which we had never done before. So just really quickly, again, those are all things because of the great ideas coming out of the folks that I worked with over the past 10 years. But great ideas don't get anywhere unless they have the support of you all. So thank you all for making it easy for me the past 10 years.
Well, thank you, Chief. You've done an amazing job, and I'm sure there'll be more accolades coming, to be honest with you. Anyone else have anything for the Chief? Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Fearborn.
That concludes staff reports tonight, sir.
All right, sir. Well, thank you very much. So now we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have several items under the consent agenda this evening. We have the minutes of the July 25th meeting, and we have 3 appointments, 2 reappointments, and 1 appointment to the Arts Commission. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move that we approve the consent agenda items A, City Council minutes for July 25th, 2022. Item B, Resolution 2219, reappointment of Jessica Berry to the Arts Commission. Item C, Resolution 2220, 22-20, reappointment of Cole Young to the Arts Commission. And Resolution 22-21, item D, Resolution 22-21, appointment of Wesley Anderson to the Arts Commission.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Want to welcome those members back and the new member to the Arts Commission. Are any of them in the audience this evening? Are you Mr. Anderson? Mr. Young, okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate your service. All right. With that, all those in favor? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. We'll now move on to unfinished business. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3732 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3732 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with SFS Architecture for the design and consulting services for the Raymore Activities Center expansion project in the amount of $300,000.
There's nothing further on this item. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of it.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move that we approve the second reading of Bill 3732, award of contract, the RAC expansion design services.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, sir. The motion has been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3732. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3730 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3730 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Central Salt LLC for supply delivery of bulk road salt.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move that we approve the second reading of Bill 3730, award of contract for bulk salt.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I will second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3730. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3737 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3737 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving the Ascend First Final Plat, a 9.94-acre tract of land located south of Dawn Street, east of Sunrise Drive, in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. If there are no further questions on this, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move that we approve Bill 3737, Ascend at Raymore Final Plat.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3737. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. We'll now move on to new business. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3739 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3739 by title only, an ordinance pursuant to Section 67.110 of the revised statutes of Missouri levying general and special taxes in the City of Raymore, Missouri for the year 2022.
Thank you. As this item requires a public hearing, I'll open the public hearing at this time and ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Ms. Williams to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Before you this evening for your consideration is the 2022 tax levy. Each year, the city is required by the state auditor's office to calculate and set our tax levy. This requirement must be recorded with the county clerk no later than September 1st. In odd-numbered years, the assessor's office assesses properties to account for changes in value. In the even-numbered year, the assessed value may increase based upon new construction. The basic theory of the Hancock Amendment is that the city revenue from property tax in the general fund and park fund should be revenue neutral from year to year for non-growth related increases in assessments. There is an allowance for inflation, and this year that rate is 7% and is provided by the state auditor. This means that typically as assessments from non-growth increase, then the levy decreases. The opposite is true and assessed values decrease. It should be noted that our overall levy for 2022 will remain the same as the levy it was set in 2021. The general fund levy for, these are always fun to read, sorry. The general fund levy for 2022 is calculated to be 41 48 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, which is 0.4158. The park levy is calculated to be 11 19 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, which is 0.1119. The debt service levy is the same as the last several years at 71 70 cents per 100 of assessed valuation, or 0.7170. This is due to the voluntary rollback. The total city tax levy is recommended to be $1.2447, which is $1.2447 in total. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Any questions for Ms. Williams or the city manager?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I would point out, because it was one of the statements that Ms. Williams made, but the overall levy this year, because the Hancock Amendment applies to our operational funds, general and park. Debt service is actually calculated different. The voters, when they vote debt service levy in to pay off our general obligations bonds, a component of that is that in any given year, we are allowed to collect within the levy enough to make payment on the general obligation bond issues both this year and next year. We don't do that. We keep the levy at the exact same amount as it was in the previous year at all times, which calculates this year for next year's levy to the council, if they approve this, rolling back 62 34 100 So we're rolling back just over 62 cents to the voters. That concludes staff report on this item, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Any questions of staff? Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to dispose, this public hearing is open. If anybody from the public would like to address the council on this issue, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Now I can use my new gavel. Nobody coming forward. We'll close it, and I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3739, setting of the 2022 tax levy.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. The motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3739. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3741 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3741 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, vacating all easement rights, including 2 sewer line easements and related sewer line temporary construction easements located within the Raymore Galleria development, Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. This item also requires a public hearing, so I will open it at this time and ask for a staff report.
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Gress to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. Mayor and council, this evening, Raymore Galleria Rear Ground, which is the developer record for the Raymore Galleria shopping center, more or less, so Lowe's, Sam's Club, all the surrounding properties. They are requesting to vacate 2 existing sanitary sewer easements and the related temporary construction easements that were granted several years ago during the development of that subdivision, or that development, and actually prior to that through previous owners. The sewer that cuts through that property has since been abandoned and rerouted through previous development activities, and therefore the sewer is no longer needed. And currently, the site plan that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission back in December of 2021, that sewer easement actually interferes with the clubhouse that developer wishes to build as part of that apartment community, and so therefore the easement does need to be vacated at this time. Since the item does require a public hearing, tonight's meeting was advertised in the July 21st Journal newspaper. And items of record include the notice of publication in the Journal, Unified Development Code, the application itself, the growth management plan, the staff report, the site plan, and also the easement exhibit that was submitted by the applicant. Staff did submit their proposed findings of fact for the application, and staff does recommend that the City Council approve case 22021, watermark sanitary sewer easement vacation. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. Any questions of Mr. Gress? Mr. Feuerborn, you have anything else to add at this time?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. As there is a public hearing open on this item, I would entertain anyone from the audience who'd like to comment on this particular issue. Please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3741, Raymore Galleria easement vacation.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3741. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3743 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3743 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the taxable industrial revenue bonds, KCI Raymore Phase 3 LLC project, Series 2022, related to an industrial development project in the city, and authorizing the city to enter into certain agreements and take other actions.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, Your Honor. I will ask Mr. Gress to begin this staff report. He'll be doing introductions from there.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. And I'll actually immediately call on Economic Development Director Brandon Keller to present the staff report.
All right.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. In 2019, the previous City Council approved a Chapter 100 property tax abatement with Van Trust for the Raymore Commerce Center development. This bond issuance is just the next step of transferring the bonds to the developer. With that, I will introduce Sarah Granith of Gilmore & Bell to provide their report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. As Mr. Keller mentioned, this is bond issuance number 2 out of the contemplated Chapter 100 plan that was approved in 2019. And if you'll remember, this plan called for several buildings within the Raymore Commerce Center. And this bond issuance is the mechanism through which the city is able to provide tax abatement that was contemplated under that Chapter 100 plan. So the ordinance before you tonight will approve several documents that will carry out that, the bond issuance, and the company is going to buy the bonds. The city's credit is not at risk in this issuance, and it's similar to the other Chapter 100 bond financings that you've approved not only with this plan, but throughout the city in other areas. A couple other mentions just on this building too is that it is the smallest of the buildings at just under 500,000 square feet. And I am aware that they have recently started construction, so it is in the works. With that, I am open to answer any questions that you may have about this.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Burke.
Thank you. In the contract where it talks about performance agreement, is that simply the schedule of payments, is the performance of paying it, or is it also including the building of the actual structures?
The performance agreement outlines several different obligations of the company and how it's built, you know, that they're going to meet the city's other standards and different aspects that the city requires. And then it also is the agreement to pay the pilots or payment in lieu of taxes, which are due each December and outlined therein.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Fearborn, on this?
Staff as well as the council is having to get used to a lot of new faces these days, Your Honor.
There's no further questions of staff. Yep, Mr. Barber.
Yeah, this question is directed at Mr. Fearborn, kind of bouncing back to the levy. We didn't have an increase and actually a decrease in our levy, and we didn't have assessed valuation property to go by. Is developments like this is what helped with that, keeping the levy the same and rolling it back?
When we look at the short form is yes. When we look at when we look at the levy this year, where we talked about this very, very high inflation rate, which is astronomical. I've never seen anything that high come from the state auditor on this form. We are only allowed in a growth year like this where there's no increase in the assessed values. All we're looking at is growth. And we can only charge within the levy the lower of growth or the inflation value. So while the state acknowledges that inflation is there, growth was lower as far as the total assessed valuation. So that's the number that we're actually allowed to charge. So in a year like this, especially where we have the reality of inflation but cannot charge it, the only thing that we are allowed to collect on is growth. And certainly any growth applies to that.
Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for staff. I'm just trying to understand these contracts better. This is the second time that I've really spent hours looking at one. Question on when it talks about the ownership of the leasehold estate, and then in the case of our previous building where they went ahead and I don't know if I'm going to use the right word, but sold the building to Southern Glazer. Did they sell it to them, or did they lease it to them, and they are the ones paying the rent in this, and then the company is paying the bonds? And so my long and short of the question is Southern Glazer part, or any other future purchaser of any of the other buildings, are they part of this equation, or is that?
Yes, sir. In the case of the previous issuance, that agreement was between the city and Southern Glazers because they had purchased the property from Van Trust. In this case, Van Trust still retains the property. They don't have an end user yet. They do not know if that end user will be a tenant or whether they'll do the same thing that Southern Glazers did, but they did want to go ahead and proceed with the issuance of the bonds, which would then be transferred over to any assigns if the building were in fact to sell, or if it did not sell but they had a tenant, they would continue with the payments in the form that they have.
So the prospective new owner subsumes this contract?
That's correct, sir.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, if there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend,
I move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3743, Raymore Commerce Center Building 2, Chapter 100 bond issuance.
thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3743. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3740 by title only?
First reading of Bill 3740 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving the Oak Ridge Farms fourth final plat, lots 58 through 60, located south of West Pine Street, east of North Madison Street in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Gress to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. This evening, Sean Siebert, who represents ORF4 LLC, is requesting the final plat approval for the fourth phase of the Oak Ridge Farm subdivision. This involves the replatting of a handful of existing lots and the platting of 2 unplatted lots within that area of development. The Planning and Zoning Commission at its August 2nd meeting voted 8-0 to recommend approval of this application for the final plat, and actually at that same meeting they voted 8-0 to approve the related site plan for the townhome subdivision that is being proposed for this property. That will conclude staff report at this time. Staff does recommend approval of the application as well.
Okay.
That concludes staff report.
All right, thank you. Any questions of staff? David, I have a question. I didn't know we were missing anybody. Wouldn't that be a 9-0 vote? From
At that meeting, we were missing Commissioner Wiggins.
Oh, that's right. You're right. We had a stand-in. I appreciate that. Thank you. I just knew that it was a unanimous vote on that. If there are no further questions, I'd entertain them. Or are there any questions of staff, if I haven't asked on this particular item? If there are no further questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3740, Oak Ridge Farms fourth plat,
Thank you.
final plat.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3740. Any further discussion? Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to thank staff in the comments on number 2 where it says all existing trees along the south side of Pine Street shall be preserved where practical. I appreciate that being put in there. I don't recall seeing that before, but it probably is every week, and I just noticed it more this time. Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Forster.
I'll add on to that. I drove by it just to see what was going on, and you could see one huge tree in the middle of all the dirt work. So thank you. You're trying to save them. I appreciate it. So, but it's pretty funny just to see that one little thing. So, big thing. It's a huge tree. Thanks.
Anyone else? Not, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend. Did we already make that motion?
Did.
Was there discussion?
yes, we did.
Oh, okay.
We did.
There's a lot of discussion
I was
going on
ready to
here.
read the
Okay.
wrong motion.
No problem. No problem. So all those in favor? It's unanimous, 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3738 by title only?
First reading of Bill 3738 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving the Ridgeview Estates first final plat, a subdivision of land located in the east half of Section 19, Township 46 North, Range 32 West, Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Gress to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. This evening for this request, Good Otis LLC, developer of the Good Ranch, is requesting final plat approval for the Ridgeview Estates final plat. This request creates 2 developable lots that are located south of Lucy Webb, immediately adjacent to Dean Avenue on the west side of the road. The Planning Commission also at its July 19th meeting voted 9-0 to recommend approval of this request. And additionally, at that same meeting, they voted to approve the related site plan for the proposed income-restricted and age-restricted residential community. Staff did submit their proposed findings of fact, and at this time, staff does recommend approval of this request. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. Any questions of Mr. Gress? Mr. Burke.
All right. Question When is the last time that we had a development go in that was not using our sewers for solid waste? Like somewhere in here it said that sewers were not being used for solid waste. I can't find the page at the moment, but let me go to the beginning, because I was very surprised to see that. I want to say it said number 6, but I'm going to have to look around. Wish I had written it down. I apologize.
Mr. Gress, sewers are going to be used for solid waste, yes?
Yes, I can confirm that the sewers on this property will be served by Raymore Solid Waste.
So we're not having 296. Says shall not be served by the city solid waste collection program.
Oh, I do apologize. That would be for trash service. And so in this case, for multifamily developments, there's some qualifiers that Constable has to
I
make
apologize.
for that.
Solid waste to me, as a biologist, seems to be something else. When I took my students to the wastewater treatment plant back at Central Middle.
I may have to look at clarifying that in my staff reports from here on out.
All right, now that we have the sanitary sewer cleared up, no pun intended. Oh, yes, Ms. Abdulgawad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a quick question. I noticed in the P&Z minutes, and maybe I don't understand, but in the P&Z minutes, it noted that they approved it subject to 14 conditions. But then I didn't notice in the staff report pointing out that what those conditions were or that they were being met. If you could clarify.
So the conditions that were placed are really a set of standard conditions for a site plan approval. It has to do with, I can give the example of when the city would issue a certificate of occupancy, certain things have to be done before we can issue a building permit, certain things have to be done. It talks about things like reporting on significant rain events for erosion control. And so those aren't typically placed on approval for a final plat, but more or less a site plan, which was approved at the Planning Commission. But like I said, for the most part, those have to do with pretty standard requirements for a site plan. I can't think of anything within those 14 that would have been outside of what we traditionally place on a site plan approval.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious because lots of times when there are conditions like that, you know, you talk about what those different things are because there's something maybe outside of the norm. That language just seemed different than what I'd seen before. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a general question regarding this particular parcel of land. Is this the same property that came before us back in October that had the LIHTC request, but we did not, the motion didn't move forward because of lack of motion?
That is correct, sir.
And has my understanding of this changed? Because I assumed that our understanding was because it was had that designation, it didn't kind of fit with the intention that we had or the vision we have for the greater property and the future of attracting premium amenities.
The council supported the rezoning. You did not support the MHDC request. The developer went ahead with the MHDC request in spite of staff and council objections and got it approved.
Understood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Ullman.
In reference to Councilmember Townsend's questions, wasn't the city economic development and development services for quite some time trying to get the owners of that property to do a master development plan for that entire area? And if so, have we gone away from that, or is the owner of the property decided to go away from that concept?
I wouldn't say that they there is a shared vision for that particular property. While low-density multifamily would definitely be a part of that vision in the narrowing part where this is going to go, we don't necessarily know if, well, we do know, and the council shared that possibly a different type of low-density multifamily, more on the luxury end, would have been preferred. We were, frankly, with the council, a little bit surprised because this does not meet many of the MHDC requirements as far as being able to provide immediate services near the area. You may remember we have another location that you also have approved for the MHDC funding right next to a number of services across the street, center of town. They continue to have difficulty getting it, so we're really not sure what the conversation was down at the state level with this particular item.
Ms. Abdullah.
And just following up, because I have the same concerns that this isn't best use of, doesn't seem to be best use of the property. You know, doesn't seem to me like a great location for this kind of development. At this point, is there anything we can do?
No.
Anyone else have anything?
Legal, blah, blah, substantial compliance.
This evening, you are making determination with regard to whether or not there is substantial compliance with the final plat as was presented to you all with the preliminary plat. As long as they are substantially compliant with each other, don't deviate substantially from it, you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room for that.
Yeah. Mr. Townsend.
Just so that I'm clear, we've been trying to get, and this is probably discussion and more of a question, I'm put it in the form of a question if you bear with me. We've been struggling with some, what we consider some premier parcels of our community to get some luxury amenities and high-end things that our community has been screaming for years. And when this particular parcel came forward, it was our understanding that this didn't meet that narrative because it would create challenges to attract those to that community, to that particular area. Is that correct in my statement?
Yes.
Okay. No, please.
Use of the property.
Use of the property, yes.
Not not the zoning of the property or the plat of the property. This is actually an ideal location for this type of development.
And I recall that from the October discussions that it was the rezoning of it why we went, but the rezoning because it was appropriate given the concept that we were going for. It was just that the type of development was of the concern, not the rezoning aspect of it. So, and then shifting from that, I do know we also have within the vicinity there was conversations regarding some infrastructure. We've got the Lucy Webb and flyover bridge conversations. Does the plat and information that's in here infringe on those potential rights-of-ways and easements if that's a reality?
They do not, sir.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want whatever we do to impede on that opportunity. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Mayor.
Yes.
Just want to impress upon you and the council, you are not taking into consideration this evening whether or not this is low income or LIHTC or otherwise, or what buildings are going to be constructed. The ultimate decision this evening is really simple 3 points. Is it substantially compliant with the preliminary plat? Have they complied with all the requirements, restrictions, and regulations under the code for the submission of a plat? And does the plat comply with any additional conditions that were attached to the approval of the preliminary plat? Those are the 3 factors for determination this evening.
There's no one else. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
based on conversations, I move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3738, Ridgeway Estates Final Plat, Lots 1 and 2.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3738. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Can I please have the first reading of Bill 3742 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3742 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, directing the mayor to execute the First Amendment to the Good Ranch Master Development Agreement dated October 14th, 2014, including the ranch lease incorporated therein.
Thank you. Is there a staff report on this?
Thank you, sir. This is the exciting part. I would ask Mr. Zer to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Mayor, members of the council, I'm happy to provide the staff report this evening regarding Bill 3742. This bill will provide for transfer and pave the way for transfer of Parkland Dedication. So in 2021, the city and Good Otis began discussions with regard to the transfer of Parkland Dedication previously identified under the original master land use plan for the Good Ranch development. During the course of those conversations, as the prior item was coming up before council or before the staff for review and consideration, it was noted that there was still a significant portion of Parkland Dedication that had not been transferred to the city. Now, a number of parcels have been transferred to the city as the Good Ranch development has continued to develop over time, but there was still a significant chunk of ground that needed to be addressed. City entered into negotiations and discussions with Good Otis over the remaining portion of the ground that needed to be transferred, and from that discussion came a proposed amendment which you have before you this evening. The original master land use plan was approved and identified under a MOU with the city and Good Otis back in 1994. That was reaffirmed and memorialized in 2014 with the master development agreement. And that master development agreement included a plan that had approximately 353 acres of parkland dedication. The goal with the parkland dedication was that it would continue to be dedicated as portions of the development occurred. Under tracks 17 and 20, the largest portion or the majority of the contiguous area that was to make up the parkland dedication included a future regional park. As part of the negotiations with Good Otis, there was identified by city staff areas that may be more appropriate for development of parkland use. As part of the process, Good Otis proposed to swap the portions of tracks 17 and 20 that included existing agricultural and residential structures, the Good Homestead, in exchange for other land areas within the Good Ranch that were not originally subject to the parkland dedication, primarily tract 18. You'll find that as the Exhibit B to the proposed amendment. This was the area adjacent to the Bridle Ridge Elementary, which would allow for a secondary access point potentially for the park department. The First Amendment identifies approximately 75 acres of land that was previously identified as parkland that will be released from the obligation to dedicate to the parkland, and in exchange, an approximate 75 acres of new ground that will be taken in. And again, you'll see that the diagram outlined for that on your Exhibit B to the Good Ranch MOU parkland dedication map. It will also allow for the immediate transfer and ownership to the city for that parkland area. It does contemplate a lease agreement that would allow for Good Otis to lease the parkland back until such time as the Parks Department have created their master plan and have a development in place that they're able to proceed forward. So it'll still be maintained by the Good Otis Good Owen individual entity. We will have the opportunity under the lease back in order to be able to terminate that lease agreement once we have a plan in place for the development of the park. The Park Board, I would note, has been given the opportunity to review the proposed swap in ground and was enthusiastically in support of the proposed change and revision. Again, this will provide for an additional access point into the park from the south side. That would conclude staff report. I'm happy to provide any answers to questions that council might have.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Ullman.
What's the acreage of Memorial or Recreation Park, sir?
Mr. Mosteen?
He was answering for me.
Recreation Park is 89 acres. That includes Moon Valley. Hawk Ridge Park by itself is 79 acres.
So this provides us a substantial opportunity for our next general use park.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for.
Yes, Ms. Forster.
Okay, I got two questions. One, when you say approximately, are we talking like a 1 or 2 acre difference, or is it going to be like a 10-acre difference?
It is the way we calculate it, and Mr. Gress was very helpful with this. We were able to utilize the brand-new mapping software that the city has purchased in order to make sure that it was a near equal match 75-75 for it. Our goal was not to lose anything. We have at this time contracted to make sure we get a meets and bounds legal description that will be supplemented into the materials when our contractor is prepared with that meets and bounds description. And would also note, yeah, I think that's it.
And if I could draw your attention to page, without my glasses, seemingly 314 of the packet, we were very excited to be able to leave what was originally contemplated as a Parkland dedication in the hands of the Good family so that they could keep their homes. But you will note the new area right next to the school provides some very, very unique opportunities for us as far as partnerships are concerned, and a very, very nice area that's pretty flat.
So my second question, sorry.
You only get one. Sorry. Moving along. No, go ahead.
I started with that too.
No, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understand. So we're getting this parkland, but we can't have it technically until we do a development right next to it? Or we can start, if we have a plan, we can go ahead and start doing it immediately?
We will obtain ownership of it immediately. It will be leased back so that we aren't having to maintain hay or otherwise the land until we have the opportunity for the park board to come up with a master development plan given the new arrangement and boundaries that we're discussing here. The terms of the lease agreement would allow for a minimum time frame where we could not break that lease agreement with the developer or with the original owner. After that time frame is expired, we have to give a 12-month notification to the owner that we are intending to proceed forward with the development of the park. And with your approval, the proposed amendment also contemplates the approval of the lease agreement.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fearborn, for somebody watching from home, there's a lot of numbers being thrown around here. If you could just kind of go through this and clarify. Mr. Zer did a good job, but maybe take it just one step further. So the plan identifies, it says 353 acres of parkland total. When this project is completed, how many total acres of parkland will it be yielding approximately?
From just this project, or in total, how many acres of parkland will we have for the city?
Well, where it says the plan identified approximately 353 acres, are we giving some of that up? Are we getting a lesser number when this is finished? Are we still going to get that 353 total when this is done?
You are, and again, this is utilization of approximate. You're not losing the 353 acres. Over the time of the development, that acreage has been in the process of being conveyed over. This is the bulk of the property at the bottom of the development, and now that the bottom portion is developing dedication of this area. So 154 plus or minus acres is what we're talking about total being included here. You are not losing on the 353 acres.
Appreciate the clarification. It's just easy for somebody to see that number and then go to a much smaller number and have a question there. So thank you.
And as an example of one of those and I think it may even be in the AIM, examples of previous dedications are the Lineal Park, Good Parkway. Items like that have previously been dedicated against the total parkland dedication. This is simply finishing off the agreement that was started in 1994.
Councilman, if you're looking at page 312, you'll see the original land use summary that was identified. Everything on there in green was to be dedicated to the city as parkland. What you're seeing here is the portions that are identified as track 17 and track 20, which are just being altered. So that's the remainder of that property that has previously been dedicated to the city.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If there are no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3742, Good Ranch Development Agreement, First Amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3742. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Good, thank you, sir. We appreciate all the time that you all spent, you and your family spent in negotiations with us to get to this. It's going to be a great addition to our park system, and we really appreciate that, sir. Thank you for being here this evening, too. And Reva, thank you for being here. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3744 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3744 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, declaring the results of the August 2, 2022 election.
Is there a staff report?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Ms. Hill to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As outlined in Raymore City Charter, Section 9.3, the City Council shall declare the results of any election at the next regularly scheduled council meeting. An election was held on August 2nd, 2022 for consideration of Question P. The ballot count included in Bill 3744 at the time of release of the agenda and council packet were the unofficial results. The official statement of certification of the election results have been distributed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the clerk? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Do I have to? Mr. Mayor?
Eventually. Yes, Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3744, declaring August 2nd, 2022 election results.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3744. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3745 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3745 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending Section 300.020 and Chapter 341 of the Raymore City Code of Ordinances.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you. I would ask Chief Zimmerman to make a staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. This section, which was brought before you in the last work session, the operation of neighborhood vehicles on public streets, clarifies the definition of neighborhood vehicles, just cleans that language up some because there was some conflict between that and low-speed vehicles, and also aligns the equipment requirements with the inspection requirements. So it makes it much clearer as to what's required in the inspection.
Thank you. Any questions of the chief? Yes, Mr. Barber.
I don't have a question. I just have a thank you, Chief, and your staff for, we've had this ordinance for some time and making it better, making it easier for our citizens to comply. And I do appreciate your hard work in the beginning with this and still with this part of it too. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? If there are no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Townsend.
Move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3745, amending City Code Chapter 341, operation of neighborhood vehicles on public streets.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. The motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3745. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Holman.
I would echo Councilmember Barber's comments. He and I were the sponsors of the original form of this motion several years ago at the behest of some of our constituents up in Creekmore, because there's a lot of people up there who like to drive golf carts around. And so I, too, appreciate staff's hard work on this, keeping up with the times, keeping us in line with what the state laws and state legislature have decreed about this. It's kind of a morphed since the time we originally proposed it. So thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3746 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3746 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending Chapter 205 of the Raymore City Code of Ordinances.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you. I would ask Chief Zimmerman to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. As again, we mentioned in the last work session, this was some additional language that will give our animal control officers some stronger language, especially in situations where an animal is being abused, neglected, or abandoned. It also provides some additional language surrounding fences, tethering, and leashes that was not really previously contained in the language. So just some additional things to allow our animal control officers to do their job better.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend?
move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3746, amending City Code, Chapter 205, Animal Control.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3746. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3647 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3647 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending Section 280.020 of the Raymore City Code of Ordinances.
Is that actually 3647, or is it 37?
Should be 3647, sir.
Well, it says 3746, the one before, and the same numbers here. I was just kind of curious if it's still the same bill number. Or should it be 3747?
Should be 30, yeah, the AIM is corrected on this one. 3747, sir.
3747? Okay.
Yes.
Already. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. So we've been given a staff report. Any question? No, we haven't been given a staff report yet, have we?
No,
She's
I would
read
ask
it.
Ms. Hill to make a staff report on this item.
Well, that's
sir.
right. I thought so.
Thank you, sir. The Raymore City Code Section 280.020 declares acts of public nuisances. The proposed amendment corrects the time for a noise nuisance from 10 p.m. to 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Thank you.
You remember that from the work session now. Does anybody have any questions of staff? If there are no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Townsend.
I move that we approve the first reading of Bill 3747, amending City Code Section 280.020, acts declared as a public nuisance.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3747. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the reading of Resolution 22 by 22 by title only?
The reading of Resolution 2222 by title only, a resolution of the City of Raymore, Missouri, changing the start times of City Council regular meetings and work sessions.
As you know, this item was talked about in work session. Part of it is to come in line with some of the other communities around us that have moved their meeting times to 6 p.m. I talked to the chief at Harrisonville who changed theirs last year. She said it's working out very well for them to have the meeting at 6 p.m. And I haven't talked to any of the other mayors, but I know they've moved theirs up to Lee Summit, has moved theirs Blue Springs as well. And it seems to be working out good for their communities. And so we thought we'd open that up for consideration and discussion. So I had the staff draw up the resolution for tonight's agenda, and I would open it up for discussion at this time. Yes, Ms. Forster.
I would have to say I have strong concerns about constituents being able to make it. I think a lot of them, I've had several actually reach out saying that they, with childcare and getting home from work, because we are working on bringing people working in Raymore, but several do still commute. So getting home and being able to make it, and then also just it's pushing it back later. Just have concerns.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything? Yes, Ms. Abdelwan.
I shared my concerns in the work session, along with a few of the other council members who asked that we not change the meeting time. And additionally, this week, like Ms. Forrester, I heard from 3 people who reached out to me to ask for us not to change that meeting time. One with a reason, the commute that Ms. Forrester brought up, people commuting from downtown by the time they get off work, get their kids picked up from daycare, getting here by 6 o'clock is just too much. And then second one, the reason was just to accommodate families that work and have after-school activities for their children. So both of those expressed that it would be difficult to take care of what they need to take care of after work and make it here for a meeting should they want to come to a meeting. So in my opinion, with the voice of 3 people on the council who asked for us not to change it, as well as 3 individuals who reached out to me, I definitely will be voting no.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Vicki?
Thank you, sir. I agree with both Tabitha and Sonia that this is a difficult scenario for our constituents. I feel like to make it that, it's not something that we had discussed prior. So for people to have to rearrange schedules, I just don't see that that would be feasible for them. Additionally, for us being council members, it's something that, that is difficult for us too. And as representatives for our constituents, I feel like that should be noted. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? Yes, Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually absent for the work session, but I had the opportunity to view it, and I appreciate the comments of all my colleagues on the dais, but I may also have to deviate from the commentary. I believe that switching it to 6 p.m. Is of a benefit for our staff, primarily those who sit in this room that are sitting here tonight. Not just them, but everyone else on the staff who supports them to be able to be here tonight to put this packet together for us to do what we do in the hour that we do it in. Tonight we affirmed the vote of the people that said that we don't want to raise or use the use tax to help our parks, our public works, and our police department. Tonight we added to their workload by adding over 100 and some odd acres to the parks department in the future years. Tonight they're asking the 8 of us to give them a little reprieve, just so that they can do what they do in a career while we only do it for a term of office. That's what they're asking, just to have a little bit of more time so that we can start an hour earlier than 2 hours after their workday, potentially. That's how I perceive it. The time that we sit here, if citizens and constituents want to come and it's an important agenda item, they will make time. We've seen it time and time again. They have made time, and we've made space for them to have an opportunity to voice their concerns, for us to hear them on whatever it be our volunteer boards or our city council sessions. So this is a simple ask. This is a small ask. We raised our hands to serve as city council members. We put up our time to serve this community. I've missed meals. I've had to use my vacation time. I had to put overtime in to compensate for time spent serving this community. So it's a simple ask, is that we move our council times earlier so that we can give our staff a little time. Yes, they don't all have to live in the city limits. Yes, they may have to, they can't go home and come back, have a break between the end of the day before they start here. But that's one simple ask that they've had. We've gone to the community twice on a use tax to help get some additional resources to the community. That has not been successful, but here's an opportunity for staff that we can show some solidarity to give our staff this one simple ask. That's my comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also missed the work session. I was able to view that. I was also able to speak to 2 of the members that opposed this. And while I initially supported this, I would much rather, personally for me, and for the staff, I would rather start this meeting at 6 and be home earlier and hopefully reduce some overtime. But in speaking with a few of my constituents up here, 2 of which are self-employed, you know, I understand there may be the occasional work conflict with their livelihood, and I don't, so because of that, and I do think it is a good point. I at one time used to work on the Kansas side, and getting off work at 5 o'clock and getting here by 6 was something I probably could have done 90% of the time, but you get those, even people that work 30 minutes, 20 minutes away, you get those nights where there's traffic congestion and accidents, and it makes that whole thing getting here in time even more difficult to do. So I think if we're going to have, they brought up a good point, if we're going to have public, what's the word I want to use? Public hearings. I think it would serve our community better to have public hearings at 7 o'clock than 6 o'clock. I think it would create an undue burden on some of our citizens to get here at 6 o'clock. So for those reasons, although I think for me personally it'd be better, I don't support changing the time at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Ullman.
Thank you, sir. I concur with Councilmember Townsend's comments. I would suggest one minor change, that if there is a motion to advance this tonight, we might want to consider holding off on that execution of that time until, say, November 1st. It's around the time of the time change. Would give people a little bit of time to prepare in advance as opposed to dropping it, say, next week. Well, we're going to be meeting early next week anyhow, but going forward, it would give us a few months preparation, and like I said, it coincides with the loss of daylight savings time as well.
Yes, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also agree with Councilman Townsend's statements. This is not about my time. I personally have given up over 4 family vacations, week-long vacations, since I've been on council, where they've gone out of state without me. And that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make for my constituents. But I do feel strongly for staff not having to, because for me, parent-teacher conferences, if we sit around for 2 hours after school's out and then we start our conferences, effectively, no one can leave work or stop work because they're still dressed for work. They're still, you can't go home and weed the garden. You can't do other things. If you pop home real quick, you can't maybe necessarily. So I think it would be easier, and if this is, here's a side note, if this was to not work out, perhaps staff members that have to stay late maybe can come in late on Mondays, but that would be a staff decision, not at our level.
This is Doug. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I don't know if you can answer or if staff can answer. In just doing a little more asking around about some of the other cities that have changed, one of the things, and I mentioned it last week and then found it to be true, one of the things I learned about some of the cities that do start earlier, part of the reason that they are choosing to start earlier is because they don't meet every single week. They only meet every other week or 2 times in a month. And so they're trying to do their work session and their regular meeting all in the same night. So for them, starting earlier made some more sense because they could either plan the work session before, then constituents could still come later, or, you know, it helped them avoid being in a meeting until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. You know, imagine if we did our work session and our regular session all in one night, you know, what those hours would look like. So that was what I learned, that was the reason that some cities were changing, was because they were staying very late into the night. But because ours are on different weeks, again, I'm kind of struggling to see the real benefit of making that change.
Thank you. Well, actually, in contrast to that, though, when I talked to Mayor Bowman tonight, they had previously had their work sessions at 6 and their council meetings at 7. They swapped them in order for people to be able to come in and go home at a fairly reasonable time. If they had to participate in the council meeting, then the council, which is normally meeting in work session by themselves, would have the opportunity to work onward from that point. Same thing with staff, working staff passed that, and if there were a number of people that didn't have to be part of the work session, they would be excused after the regular meeting. So there are two sides to that coin. So I mean, I see what you're saying, but I've also heard the opposite of that as well. And frankly, I'm in a unique position as mayor. I have an office here, and I have an opportunity to come in and mingle with people sometimes from 4 o'clock on or 5 o'clock on whenever I get here to prepare for the meeting. And there isn't a lot of productive effort on their part, but they can't really leave the premises. And so it's, I think it is, kind of an ask what Mr. Townsend said. It's a little help for staff with regard to being able to get out of here maybe a little bit earlier because we're getting through in an hour and a half usually, and they can get out of here and have to maybe grab something across the street for a quick dinner between 5 and 6, and then be able to come to the meeting and get through that. So I think there's good arguments all around for this particular item, but that's why I have it on the agenda tonight for discussion. Mr. Barber.
Yeah, I haven't said anything, so I think I'll kind of chime in. Mr. Townsend, you made some great points, and there was some great points at the work session that I didn't even think about. Initially, I was like, I don't care, just tell me to be here, but what time to be here. But when you look at, our first obligation obviously is to the citizens of Raymore. We had 3 public hearings tonight, and I don't think anybody came up and spoke. And we've only got one person in the audience tonight, and he comes every meeting, so he doesn't really count. But people, you do count, I'm sorry, Mr. Bierman, but if people need to be here for a reason, they will be here for a reason. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I had time scheduled to be out of town on Monday, and then I realized that we're going to present the budget on Monday. And it's like, I have an obligation. That's the most serious thing we do and look at for this city, and I was not going to miss that. I wasn't going to do that to Mr. Fairborn. So I see, and we've also had staff poached. Communities are looking at our staff, and they're taking them from us because they're good quality people. And I'd hate to lose staff members. We already know they're overworked. We've already done the study, and I'd hate to lose people because of something like that. Yeah, I could get home an hour or 2 earlier than I do on the meeting. So I think it's my obligation to do everything we can for staff, for the citizens, and I think this is a small step in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Ms. Abdelgawad.
Just, I guess from my heart, and of course I'm in an interesting position because my husband is staff, but it was the people of Ward 4 who elected me to this position. The staff does a great job serving the city. They're paid to do that, not to devalue what any of you do at all, but I'm here to represent the people in my ward, in Ward 4, who voted for me, and so I think it's their voice that I need to reflect tonight.
It's interesting you should say that, because at the work session, I brought this issue up, and my number is published, my email is published, and I didn't receive one call. And I think I represent the city as the mayor. So I know they probably figure I'm not a voting individual. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. I'm just saying they didn't bother to reach out to me on it, and I was the one that brought it up. Mr. Burke.
I'd like to call the question to a vote.
I don't believe there's a motion at this particular time.
Okay.
We need a motion for the call to question. And Mr. Berenson.
Make the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask, does the city take a stance on this? The city does support this, I'm assuming, right? Are they neutral? Are they supportive?
Staff would love to see it move to 6.
Okay.
There's no question about that. But staff, to the question about coming in late, this staff. The staff is not going to come in late. We have a job to do. If the council chooses to keep this at 7 o'clock, staff is going to be here, and we're going to support you, and we're going to enjoy meeting with you at 7 o'clock. If you choose to move it to 6, the same thing's going to apply. My staff is going to give this council 100% no matter what time this meeting starts. and you have my promise on that.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments before I ask for a motion or to dispose of this item? Anybody want to make one?
Did you want? Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move that we approve Resolution 22-22, changing of the start time of the City Council regular meetings and work sessions.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Motion been made and seconded to approve Resolution 2222. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Against? The motion is 4 yes and 4 no, and the chair votes yes. So the motion carries. We'll now move on to public comments. If anyone from the public would like to address the council at this time, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments 5 minutes or less. Hearing none, we'll move on to Mayor Council communication, and I'll start with Mr. Barber tonight. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Your Honor. First and foremost, want to thank our Chief of Police for 10 years of service. You've done that list you did. I mean, that's just a fraction of what you and your staff have done. But the main thing is our citizens are safe, and they continue to be safe, and you guys have done a fabulous job. I know speaking with you, every day is not going to be Saturday for you. You're not just going to retire and decide what you do on that morning. You've got things to do, and I know you're very, very, very involved with the SAFE program. And I just want to tell you, I could do this personally, but I'll do it from here. I'll be very disappointed if I don't get a call every year from you when the Guns and Hoses happen. So you have my commitment. So we'll keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo the comments from my colleague here. Chief, thank you for everything you've done, and you will be definitely sorely missed. I can very appreciate everything. In addition to everything you've done, I want to thank you and everybody else that on city staff who showed up on Tuesday to try to help our efforts in passing question P. That didn't fail because our staff didn't work hard enough. I mean, I'm sure everybody up here voted and saw that several staff members were out there in the heat all day long. So again, it went noticed by a lot of people, and thank you for your efforts. I know we fell short, but it wasn't because you didn't work hard enough. You certainly worked very hard for that, so thank you. Tonight we dedicated some Parkland dedication. That's a big deal. Very happy to see that. Let's see here. Mini Red Run's coming up, Nathan, in 2 weeks. Is that right? Okay. I have a young one that's going to be going there, so Mini Red Run, that's good. And all my glasses, so I can't see anything else on here. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude my comments because I'm looking forward to the Prairie at Carroll Farm preliminary plat.
Yeah.
And that concludes my blurry comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to publicly acknowledge Chief. Thank you for all you've done for the community. Chief, it's been outstanding. I think my first foray into the police and community engagement with regards to issues with community pools. You know, in our community there were some issues with truancy, if you will, with the pools, some of the area pools, and we got everybody together to come to some understanding of the pool systems. So appreciate you and that, kind of educate me on how that process works. And just everything else. You know, it's been an outstanding time to serve with you. I know my daughter's looking forward to stopping by to say hi and goodbye at the same time. It's weird, the relationship, but she enjoys Jan, as she says. And I tell her, no, that's Chief, okay? All right, you can stop that. But outstanding. Again, best of luck to you and the family. Thank you for everything you've done for the community. We did a lot tonight. It's been said already. There's a lot of approvals and a lot of money moving back and forth, a lot of parkland dedicated. So we got our work cut out for us. Some big brain ideas coming forward from the Parks Department on what to do with all that property out there. And I know we got now, probably look at it at Hawk Nest South, you know, if you will. You know, it's just, you know, thinking big. You never know. Some sort of, you know, outstanding amenities out that way, that part of town. So outstanding support. from the staff tonight. Appreciate all you do to make this city the best that it is, and this dais as well. I know sometimes we seem to have little friction points, but it's all for the best. It's all for the community. It's all for everybody. So appreciate it, and stand professional in doing it. You know, that's sometimes hard to do as you look at other areas, but we do a good job of staying professional at it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Forster.
I have to follow suit. Thank you for all that you've done, and for whenever new people come in, you've always been a welcoming force. Whenever we first came in and we talked about wanting to do a bicycle rodeo, I mean, part of me thought you were going to just completely take over because you were so excited and you did great, which is, you were always very helpful in anything we've ever wanted to do, made it super easy, and almost one-upped it to make it even bigger than what we visioned. So I would say you've always been involved, a doer, and making sure things get done. So you have some big shoes you're leaving behind for somebody to step into, which he'll do good too. You've brought up a group of people around you that I feel like you've not only led just by doing, but also by showing and teaching. So it's going to be hard to see you gone. Thank you.
Ms. Wills.
Thank you. I agree with everyone, absolutely. I mean, there's not, you have done just a phenomenal job. So, thank you for your time and for the amazing guidance that you have given this city. Like Tabitha said, you are leaving behind big shoes to fill. So you have just done wonders for us. So thank you very much for that. I did also want to remind everyone that we work for the citizens of Raymore, and that we shouldn't force people to make things work to fit what is convenient for us. And I do not by any means want to discredit or discourage or say anything negative about the city staff, because I have come into this for a very short period of time and have learned like things I would never even think I would learn about at all. And that's because of such an amazing city staff, for sure. So I do very much appreciate them, but I do also just want to remind people that we represent our constituents and we have to keep what is best for them in mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Belgawad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with one thing I don't think anyone else has said, and that's just showing thanks and appreciation to our new and reappointed members of the Arts Commission that we approved this evening. I'll echo what Mr. Berenson said about question P and the staff's hard work on that. It was seen. I think we educated a lot of people in the community, disappointed by that decision by the voters, but great job to staff. Your work was noticed. Chief, I'll keep it short. It's been 10 great years. You will be missed, but your list of all of the things that happened in the police department, I know you won't accept credit for them, though a lot of the credit should be given to you. Lots of great things have happened with PD while you've been here. It has been 10 great years, and thank you so much for all you've done. And then I'll just wrap up with sharing, I'm really disappointed by the decision of the council, the last decision we made. It doesn't go unnoticed by me. I didn't share the emails I got were from other women, so it doesn't go unnoticed that the voices of the women were not heard. I know that's not the issue, but it kind of is, because we tend to be more responsible for getting home and getting dinner for our kids, for picking kids up from daycare, for trying to be the full-time mom and taking care of the family. So lots of times it's harder for women to do extra things like this, to own this role in the community. And I'm glad that I'm not the only one up here tonight who's striving and trying to do those things. And we'll keep being determined in doing what we do despite the difficulties that lie in front of us. Thank you.
Mr. Holman.
Thanks, sir. Chief, I found your comment and your report tonight interesting. If I had written that for you, I would have gone 180 degrees the other way. You listed very tangible things and certainly important things that were part of the department moving forward during your tenure. I would have gone more with the anecdotal things, the constant drive to make our people feel safe, as reflected by our citizen surveys every year. That's one of the top 3 reasons people locate to our city. You keyed in on that during your entire time frame. People felt comfortable around you and the police department, and they still feel safe here. You have left an indelible mark on this city, and it will be remembered for a long, long time. And so I just found that it was your persona and your vision as a leader, I think, that made the most impact. Those things were certainly important, but they came as part of your leadership. I really believe that, and your coexistence with the vision of what the people in the city wanted. So thank you. I won't be able to be here on the 19th. I'll be out of town that day. I'm going to miss that, but perhaps I can take you out to lunch sometime. Mr. Zerr, thank you, sir. People watching, people that are not familiar with the processes here, think that we have, if you will, the power of the monarchy. Just say yes or just say no. And there are items, depending upon their nature, that require us to function only in a ministerial action. As you laid out for us tonight, there are 3 items here for consideration on this. And so thank you for keeping us straight and on the path that we have to be on, sir. We greatly appreciate you as well, having you here to look at things like that for us and remind us what our duties are, sir. Very much so. And then the Parkland Dedication, everybody's talk about that. One of the things that may have gotten a little bit lost in this, and if you haven't spent any time on the Parks Board, Councilmember Delgawad and I both have, yes, it's always great to have more land dedicated to the city, but Nate will tell you, if you get deep into conversation, if you look at our park system, we really basically have one general use park, and that's Recreation Park. Hawk Ridge Park is beautiful, but it's very specific. It's a passive use park. You don't have any ball fields up there. The land and the lay of it doesn't allow for that. TB Hanna is a beautiful park, again, not a general use park. We now have land available for the potential use as a second general use park, which Nate will tell you we've needed for some time. So the conceptual and the vision part really goes into play here with that, and I think that's why Mr. Feuerborn led off with this is the exciting part, in addition to the fact that we're just getting the land. Also, one final thing for clarification, been a lot of discussion about, I was voted here by the people of my ward. Just a little bit of a clarification. We represent, each one of us represents all citizens of the city, not just Ward 4, not Ward 3, Ward 1, Ward 2. We were elected by the people of that ward so that there is equal representation across the geography of our city. But we represent all 23,000 plus citizens of the city. Thank you. That's all I have. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with something a little different. I think there's an opportunity with our new neighborhood vehicles regulations that we could have a page in the quarterly review on, hey, here's what a neighborhood vehicle is, and here's what you need to have to participate. Not a negative, but a positive. Because we called them low-speed vehicles, and we probably had an article on that years ago, and now it's time for some more education. But it's an idea, not a directive, always. Also, I want to speak to the chief. If I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, were you a dispatcher during the Hyatt Skywalk? All right, well, for my family personally, 3 of my family members were at the Skywalk. 2 of them survived and 1 did not. My daughter's named after my mother-in-law that passed. And there are a couple other people here in Raymore that I know were first responders. The Gurins were, but my point about that is you went through a huge amount of stress, and after that was over, you had time to reflect, and you decided to stay in policing. And that would have, I'm sure there were many people that did not stay in policing, didn't stay in firefighting, didn't stay in, EMT services after that situation. And I really think that those kind of situations forged you into the leader that we've welcomed and cherished for the last 10 years. Because those early experiences, they break a lot of people. And especially, I also want to point out that as a woman in the 70s, I'm sure it wasn't the easiest profession at the time, and for you to have been acknowledged by your entire state at the end of your career is a huge, huge deal. And but I mean, there are a lot of people that, had they made different decisions in their first part of their career, they wouldn't have gone on to greatness. So I appreciate those decisions that you made.
Thank you, sir. And a couple of thank yous for me tonight to the staff on question P. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm here quite a bit and saw the hard work and dedication and the desire to build upon what we have here to provide additional services by providing additional personnel. And I want to thank one particular person, Melissa Harmer. Melissa worked very hard in educating our community. She worked long hours. She answered a lot of questions via the internet and Facebook to try to educate people, while everybody else on the staff was working toward educating folks as well. Melissa stepped forward and went above and beyond the call. And Melissa, I know you put in a lot of hours on that. I know it's somewhat of a disappointment to you as well as it is for everyone up here. But I want to thank you personally for all the hard work you did on that, because the staff, it wouldn't have gotten, I don't think it would have gotten the kind of support it had we not put out the education effort that we did. And you're the key to that. So thank you so much. And to the rest of the staff for all your hard work on that. And then Chief, in the immortal words of a dear friend of ours, this is just Chris talking to Jan, right? She knows what I'm talking about. So back in 2011, when I'd announced I was going to retire from the police department, one of my dearest friends was given a call to see if she'd be open to the idea of applying. And I know she gave it an awful lot of thought. Probably at one time decided you weren't going to, but then, I know, right? Who was she? Some young lady that just didn't know what she was doing, I guess, at the time. But she did put in her application, and she did become our chief. And I am amazed at the next levels that she took this department. And I just, as a dear friend and a colleague, I couldn't be happier and more proud of the work that you've done and the success that you've shown throughout your career, and a tough career to be a female in, a female leader. And that says volumes about your inner persona and your leadership qualities, and you will be missed. You will be missed. And you know, it's a crazy thing to say, you're leaving behind big shoes, but I guess that's it just goes without saying that you do. Your credentials, your background, your representation of the community and the police department, are second to none. And we've been so proud to say we're from Raymore, excuse me. I know Raytown, right? From Raymore. We were just talking about her mom moving out of Raytown. That's why we were talking about that, yeah. And just proud of you, just so proud of you. And thank you so much. And there'll be more to come, I'm sure, on the 19th, and when we have the celebration of your career here. And I thank you for your service, ma'am. And that's all I have this evening. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Berenson, did you have something?
Yeah, can I add two more really quick comments?
Sure.
I thank city staff for being out there and helping with question P. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a former colleague of ours who probably lost half his body weight sweating out here at Centerview, but Tom Circa really worked very hard to help us with that, and I was amazed at the energy that guy had all day long. So I just wanted to mention his name. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. And then pick on Kevin here next to me. I appreciate you organizing your schedule not to miss the meeting work session next week, but I'm going to miss the work session next week from a vacation that I didn't book, somebody else did. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. And I'll entertain now a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr.
I move
Townsend.
that we adjourn from the regular city council meeting for August the 8th.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion,
Thank you, Mr. Holman. All those in favor of the motion? We are adjourned. Thank you so much.